Hey everybody, and welcome to episode 2 of the Out of Potions podcast. I am Warren.
I am Red World.
I am Zell, also known as Zell XP.
Fresh rebrand, hot off the press.
Full rebrand.
Literally like 24 hours ago. Twitch is gone, officially gone.
Yeah, so
they took the
formerly
website down.
Zell Twitch. Maybe one day. It's probably getting close.
The purple snake.
Maybe the purple snake, yeah. Justice for Dr. Disrespect.
I don't know what any of that means.
I'll show you.
Yeah, so this week we're going to be talking about Dark and Darker. Hey, Warren here. I just wanted to get ahead of the episode to get in here and say that I was having a fair amount of connectivity issues due to my internet, and so there's a lot of moments in this episode where I may be talking and saying a point, and you'll see the other two folks having an issue saying they can't hear me or see me. Because I was recording locally, you're going to be able to hear and see everything from my feed, so if there's any confusion during those kind of times, just understand that's what's going on. Yeah, with that, anyway, get back to the episode. Bye. Dark and Darker, which is a extraction shooter multiplayer game by IRONMACE. We'll get more
definitely
into
not
what
a shooter.
that. Yep. What?
I mean, there's bows in it. There's bows and crossbows.
It's
Yeah,
from. Okay, I should say it's from what's called the extraction shooter genre, which I guess is gonna start slowly getting boiled more into just calling it an extraction game. But it's from that genre, but it's all medieval weaponry and yes, no guns. That said,
Extraction
we're gonna be talking
looter.
about the shut.
PvP, PvE,
It's just
RPG.
it's a PvP. It's a sports game. So we're gonna talk about.
It's a sports shooter.
We're going to talk about the game, and we're going to talk a bit about kind of the situation going on around the game, a little bit of news on it, and if we're able to get to it, we'll touch on some more topics, but I think this one will be pretty beefy, so yeah, that's about it. I guess if there's no other preamble, we can just get right into it. Anybody want to, Zell, Red, one of you, a bit more familiar than me, you want to give a just kind of breakdown on the game itself?
Well,
Yeah.
I'll let Zell give a breakdown of the game, but here's the things, like, I think there's, like, hot topics surrounding it, right? 1, its release. 2, the legal drama that has been preceding its release and still ongoing, right? And then, you know, I don't know, 3, 4, and 5 would just be, like, things about the game in general.
Yeah. So, which do you want to talk about the game first? Do you think we should touch on the kind of the news and its production first? Do you think that'd be better?
I think we should describe the game first. Like,
Okay.
just, you know, describing what does it mean when you fire it up? What are you looking at? What do you do? What's the goal? How do you play it? That type of thing.
You want me to take a stab at it?
Take a stab at it.
All right. Dark and Darker is a PvP, PvE looter extraction game. Very similar to Tarkov, if you know what that is, in that you're dropped into an arena, for lack of a better word, with about 10 to 15 people. And your goal is to fight the PvE monsters and loot the chests and get as much stuff as you can, and then extract from the map before you die. Anything you extract with, you get to keep, and you can sell it to merchants for gold and things of that nature. If you die, people can just loot it right off your body. So there's a very cool dynamic in between, like, running into people and staying away from people, because you have to, like, weigh the risk of, like, well, if I beat this guy, I get everything that he looted in this dungeon. But if he beats me, he gets everything I looted in that dungeon. It is based off of Dungeons and Dragons, and I would say, I don't know, light fantasy? Is that how you guys would describe it? Like, because it's kind of realistic.
So it's based off Dungeons and Dragons, or do you just mean like fantasy, dark fantasy kind of genre in general?
Well, it is based off of Dungeons and Dragons, the classes and the environment, and yeah.
I don't know if I would say light fantasy, right? It's really heavily, you know, medieval spells, skeletons, ghosts, goblins. That's pretty high fantasy, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I guess when I say light fantasy, I just mean like it looks kind of realistic. You know, it's like the buildings are kind of realistic, the barrels are kind of realistic.
Yeah, definitely a realistic take on it. Like, you wouldn't think like Sea of Thieves type of, cartoon rendition. It definitely errs on the side of looking real.
Yeah, but to your point, zombies, skeletons. I even ran into some weird little like dragon chocobo thing I've never seen before. That was kind of interesting. But some of the classes you can be in the game, just off the top of my head, there's barbarian, there's fighter, there's wizard, there's ranger, there's rogue, there's bard, there's warlock.
Druid coming.
Druid's coming soon.
So
Cleric.
safe to imagine that all the big ones you would see from a D&D or particular fantasy games would probably show face in this, at least at some point, or in some kind of fashion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a lot. So it's from that extraction genre, which the big one, the big hit one that first kind of got popular, right, was Tarkov, which was the same idea, but a first-person shooter. So almost exactly the same idea, right? You're collecting risk reward. How long can I stay in here to get better stuff, and then pull out whenever things get too spicy.
Never pull out.
Never pull out. That's honestly. I'm gonna write that down. That's the new name for the podcast.
Take notes. I just made that up.
Next tattoo. Yeah.
I think I want to say the first game that kind of popped out with an idea similar was I was looking into it, and it looks like it was what is it? The Division, a game that had its own share of problems and crashed. But I heard that the Tarkov is almost like a natural evolution from the idea that the Division kind of sparked with the what was it called, the Dark Zone, something like that. Where
Interesting.
Yeah, because it was the same kind of idea, right? You'd go out and try to collect, and people were. It was built a little, different to where it didn't work out because people could camp the specific spot you came in and left, kind of thing. But the bones were there.
Another game that falls into that genre, The Cycle, RIP.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was looking it up. There's really not many. The Cycle is one that a lot of people enjoy. They moved from Tarkov towards that. A lot of people like the game that we spoke about briefly that you guys kind of started playing, which was the Hunt Showdown. Same kind of thing, but put it in like a Van Helsing kind of monsters and crossbows.
Hunt Showdown kind of reminds me of like Van Helsing's a good way to describe it. You know what it makes me think of though, and this is not going to be relatable to too many people, but the Dark Tower series. I kind of get like
I could see
Gunslinger, Dark Tower series, Western fantasy vibe out of
Western fantasy is actually that's like the perfect way to describe it.
Yeah, that sounds exactly like it.
But this game came out. It was really the first time that someone tried to approach it and bring a non-shooter mindset to it, make it all melee, adding this interesting mechanic of areas being so dark that like light is very much like another character in the room where you have to be aware of what's going on with the light.
Yeah.
You have to understand that if certain lights are off, you can't see an enemy. Pitch black means pitch black.
Well, so that's a good area to expand on, not to cut you off.
No,
but talking about what is Dark and Darker and how you play Dark and Darker, so you got all these classes, right? You're trying to get all the loot, you're trying to extract, and as Warren just touched on, the light and the darkness is meant to be a pervasive aspect in the game. So you can, I would say, Zell, I don't know, probably 95% of the light sources in the game you can interact with.
Oh yeah.
Meaning you could turn them off or turn them on. And the types of things that you have on your person affect on how illuminated you are. So for instance, there's like health potions and mana potions, and those are shiny and bright. So if you're in perfect darkness but you've got potions on your belt, you can be seen. So you can elect to take that, the kind of risk reward, right? You can elect to take the risk and say, okay, I don't need quick access to potions. I'll take them off my belt. and now you can blend into the darkness perfectly, where you could potentially, get a surprise ambush on someone. A lot of really, really cool scenarios you can set up in PvP situations around, using light and dark to your advantage. I think
God, that was a fat cat. Oh my
that was a
god.
that was a thick
They're,
one.
they're on a diet. They're on a diet. They're on a diet.
I thought that was a stuffed animal. That dude is spherical.
She's a lady. He does not miss a single meal.
God, you can tell. Sorry, Red. I'm sorry. Holy shit.
She gets second breakfast.
But actually, Red, you and I can relate to this recently, Warren. I'm not sure if you were watching at the time, but we were playing either yesterday or the day before and talking about how much the darkness impacts the game. Red and I were like in a 2v3 situation. These guys were way more geared than we were. Red dies. I'm at like 1 HP and I just take off running. And I've got this full team chasing me. And I've just got a little bit of a lead on them. I go into this room, walk into the corner, and crouch. And this guy, this fighter literally opened the door, walked like 3 feet in front of me, couldn't see me, turned around and left. Like, the darkness is so intense that you can literally go invisible in a corner.
Well, it's supposed to be intense, which we can get to.
We'll touch on the issues with the game, but sticking to the main topic, that'll 100% come up when we get to that.
It's perfect. There's no issues.
Yeah. As far as the core ideas of the game, I mean, it is very much. I mean, I say y'all's jam, but I think this would be my jam too. I don't think this is something that would fall out of my realm of like enjoyment. It's very early right now. I've been busy. I didn't really feel a pull to be doing it. I know that y'all have had a third essentially for a lot of the time you've been playing, and I know the game. I want to say it caps out at 3. So it's just, I knew it would just end up being one of those like awkward things. I'm like, yeah, you know what? I'm still in Rocket League and I'm, doing stuff with that. So I'll let that be the time that I can spend doing some multiplayer for now.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, yeah. So there's solos, and then there's trios. That's kind of the group dynamic. But of course, you can go in as like a 2-man, or you can even solo into the 3-man queues. So yeah, it caps out at 3 currently.
Yeah.
So how's the?
Oh,
sorry.
Well, I was just gonna say, all right. So I think that's kind of Dark and Darker in a nutshell.
Yeah.
So why are we talking about it, right? There's all the legal drama going on, which is real spicy and interesting, and then there's just kind of, I think, discussing sort of the state of the game itself, or maybe, I don't know, various other aspects of the game. Maybe we can start with, Zell, you have been just dying for this game. All day, every day, I hear this guy say, I'm just waiting for Dark and Darker, I'm just waiting for Dark and Darker. This is a Dark and Darker waiting room.
That is what and I've gotten that sentiment from a lot of people. So why is that? What's making this so special?
There's a big gap in the gaming community for melee multiplayers. Like there's not really that like sandbox BR melee experience that people have been craving. I always revert back to this game called The Culling. And The Culling was a very simple idea. It was like 12 people drop into a map on like the perimeter, and then you run through this map and you like loot lockers for like weapons and armor, and then your goal is to be the last one to survive. And the game came out and it was amazing, and then it wasn't so amazing, and then it died. And there just really hasn't been anything to like fill that gap since then. And there's a community out there that's just been craving some sort of like complicated melee BR style game, and this just kind of like scratched the itch just right.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. The Culling left a huge hole in a niche of gaming that shockingly, amazingly, I actually am flabbergasted by it all the time, but it just seems like companies aren't stepping up to fill that gap, that melee BR gap. What was it called? Darwin Project?
Mm-hmm. There was a Darwin Project.
What? Did that game die? Whatever happened to that?
Yeah, I think I had a pretty strong following for several months, and then yeah, it kind of just followed the same trend that culling and other games of that nature did. For some reason, these melee sandbox games grab this following of people, and then they just die.
Why do you think they're dying?
Oh gosh, if you ask the community, you'd get a million different ragey answers. Um, the most common scenario I run into is that the developers make decisions that the community doesn't agree with, and they eventually just continue down that path until no one's around anymore. But I don't know, even the looter extraction genre in general, like Dark and Darker, Tarkov, the Cycle, I I I'm not sure that it's fully matured yet, in that the game is really based off of like you kind of starting with nothing and then running through the arena and gaining things. But because you can extract loot, it allows you to start with better stuff. And it's like the longer you play the game, the more really good stuff you have to start the game with. So it's like you kind of get to this point where if someone plays too much, they're not really they're not really forced into that whole like, oh, you start with nothing and you fight your way to stuff. It's just like you're the best always, and if you played enough, you're never not going to be the best. So I'm not sure if the genre is fully flushed out yet.
Yeah, I was looking and it looks like, is Tarkov still in beta status? Like, I feel like
I wouldn't be surprised.
there's a lot of like all these games that are in this genre right now, which isn't many, are they're baby, and I think that I mean, look what happened when the first AAA BR came out. What I consider the first AAA BR was Fortnite. It was like the first real company putting a ton of money into it. The first company that did it, it blew up because people were like, oh my god, it's so nice to do this thing that I've loved doing in shitty games and actually be able to pick things up off the ground when I see them, and hits are landing, and I think that this is due for that. And I'm sure if you looked in the different like project files for big companies, there's probably a couple that have been in development, but games take so long to develop that like I wouldn't be surprised, especially after Dark and Darker's popularity, to have that bug in the ear of like execs at some slightly larger companies that might be cobbling something together, like maybe, I don't know, Nexon or something.
Interesting you say that. I
Uh,
would love to see a AAA game do this.
I was gonna say, you brought up Fortnite, and I'm thinking of Fortnite as a BR, and I'm trying to think of like how that relates to these like looter extractions. And I think I would maybe say these looter extraction games are like a subgenre of BRs.
Oh yeah.
Because the core gameplay itself is very BR, right? You're in an arena, you got all these other players, and in a sense, you're trying to be the last one to survive. In the extraction looters, you don't have to be the last one to survive; you just have to survive, right, until you can get out with all your stuff. Um, which I think it's a cool take on the BR genre. The culling was more just like true blue BR. There was no extraction portion, and I think that's worth maybe considering like the nuanced difference between in the extraction looters, you have that problem that you just mentioned, Zell, where you make it out with gear, you get stronger, and then you can go in stronger the second time, and you can kind of snowball, and eventually you can get to a point that, you can kind of probably just keep snowballing. And I think that that might be an inherent flaw of the extraction looter genre, unless you take into account some kind of, consistent wipe schedule. Which also sucks because it's like every time you're working towards something, it's going to get wiped, but, any kind of live service game has seasons, and it's kind of the same thing. So, I don't know. It's an incomplete thought, but it just occurred to me that, there's sort of a relationship there that's not like one for one.
Well, yeah, because, I mean, you got to figure in a BR, it's almost like someone played the BR and was like, man, this would be great if like more than just one person out of the 100 in this match got to have a good feeling at the end of it.
Yeah.
99 people are leaving this being like, fuck, and it's like, and like one person gets to feel good. So it's like, what if everyone could feel good? Like in a way, everyone can exit a match of Dark and Darker feeling satisfied because you got some good stuff and you were able to dip out with your buds. And maybe that's kind of how that spawned. I'm glad it is, because honestly, that was my main issue with BRs is that most of the time when you're doing a play session, like even if you get good at it, more often than not, at least in my case, every match is ending with that loss, and it's never like a fun feeling. Like, you know, it's never fun to like be playing for 40 minutes and then just get hit by something. That being said, I mean, I loved PUBG, and I think back to that one as like the BR that I really enjoyed the most. And yeah, I it just seems like extraction is like the natural. Like, imagine if you were playing a match of PUBG and you're like, you know what, I'm gonna dip out for fewer rewards, but because I survived this long, I get loot for it. Boop. I think that's the extraction genre.
I played a ton of H1Z1.
Yeah. Which
yeah,
don't you feel like PUBG gets undue respect for kicking off that genre when H1Z1 was right there doing it like over a year beforehand? And that kind of fucked up.
Yeah, I do think H1Z1 was doing it first, but it was a little rough. It was a little rough, and then PUBG came out,
rough.
and PUBG was like, it was very polished for the time. It wasn't perfect, but for the time that game came out, it was good. But the thing with BRs, and like I said, I've played a ton of H1Z1. I probably have like 3,000-4,000 hours in H1Z1.
Jeez.
But it pushed me away from BRs a little bit. You know, I did H1Z1, I did PUBG, I did Fortnite, but the loop with those BRs is like, okay, when you start it, you're really bad. So you gotta load into a lobby, and you gotta wait for 5 minutes for the lobby to fill up, and then you gotta wait for 5 minutes for the lobby to launch, and you like fly down to your little spot, and then it's like, okay, another 3 minutes of like running around a building trying to loot a gun, so now you can do something. And then you're like, okay, now I can play the game like 8, 9, 10 minutes in. And then because you're bad, the first engagement you get into, you die. And you're like, okay, well now I gotta go back to the lobby, and I gotta wait 3 or 4 minutes.
Like, here we go, back to the starting line. Like, it's like your death isn't the punishment. Like, not getting the victory isn't the punishment. The punishment is like, you get to wait. Sit, like, you're like, you go to timeout if you lose, and that sucks.
And that's
if you're not performing at a high level in those games, you are heavily burdened with a lot of downtime, which I think can be, you know, just mind-numbingly boring and frustrating, right? It's like, dude, you get past that 9-minute like spin up time, and then you die to the first engagement. All I'm thinking about the whole time is, I have another 9 minutes before I get to click someone again. And it's like, bro, this sucks.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where I think Dark and Darker does it really well, because it's like the game is very slow paced, which as I get older, I'm enjoying more and more, because each action feels more deliberate. But it's like, because Dark and Darker has PvE, and that's like the focal point. It's like, okay, well, we can fight skeletons, and we can open treasure chests, and we can get all this loot, and sometimes we don't even run into a player, and we get to extract, and it's like, you're being benefited just for playing the game. And another thing they do really well is in Dark and Darker, you get experience, which makes your character stronger. So honestly, even if you load into the game and you kill one skeleton, then you die, like, you're still benefiting, you're still working towards something.
That's a net gain. And I think that's another thing about it, is that a lot of those shooters, most BRs, maybe every BR of note, there's no NPCs, there's no PvE element, and I think that that's another way to keep it engaged when it comes to these. I don't know about the other extraction games, but at least this one, like, it's still challenging and fun to go around fighting skeletons, even though they're like, you know, they're relatively weak. Like, it's like Dark Souls. Like, you can still get caught out, you can still mindlessly walk by and hit a trap. Like, there's a lot of fun little things to make the match engaging, aside from running into a person that might be, you know, way over geared and beat you up. But I think the game seems like it gives you enough tools to be able to combat even people that are geared, at least in the, you know, like, it hypothetically gives you the tools to either escape or turn the tables, whether using the PvE elements or hiding and ambushing, things like that.
There's a handful of areas we can branch from that sentence. Sentences, run-on sentence. That wasn't a dig.
Was that insult? Did you insult me?
No. To the point of the PvE, everything hits really hard. Which is kind of Dark Souls-esque. The game is much slower and deliberate, which I also have a big appreciation for. It's one of the reasons that I'm enjoying Hunt the Showdown so much, is because it's like I think the way I described it to you, Zell, and I probably described it in the Discord too, but it's in a world of like Apex Legends games where you're cracked out of your mind doing 360s, slide canceling, kicking in doors, everything's just like high octane, fast pace. Like, bro, I can't keep up with it, man. I don't have the hand-eye coordination anymore, the reaction speed. Like, I would much rather be in combat where it's me looking at one other person and our swings take 3 seconds,
Hmm.
and the fight is actually almost like a chess game. It's not about who can swing faster or close the gap faster. It's about knowing how to counterplay my opponent or put my opponent in a situation where I'm going to be advantageous. And I much prefer that type of combat, which is why I do in general enjoy Dark and Darker's combat. Um, the other thing I think we can kind of spin to from what Warren was saying is, um,
We
man,
could,
my last 4 brain cells really just really just ran out.
While you're thinking of that, I did want to mention while we were still on that PvE topic that the game has bosses in these maps too. Like
Yeah.
pretty intense, complicated bosses where it's like most of their moves will one-shot you. You have to learn each of their moves and how to dodge them. Very Dark Soul-esque. Like there's a one-player map called the Goblin Caves, and in the Goblin Caves there is a cave troll. That's the boss. And he's basically got 3 attacks. He's got like a low swing, he's got like a run charge, and then he's got like a overhand swing. And it's like when he does the low swing, you have to jump it. If you don't jump it, he's gonna kill you. And then when he charges you, you have to crouch. If you don't crouch, he's gonna kill you. So it's like this cool thing where you're like, yeah, you're actually like doing a dance to be able to beat this boss. But at the same time, you always have to be watching your back because there's like 10 other people that know where that troll is, and he makes a ton of noise. And it's such a fun, complicated dynamic.
Yeah, I love that. I feel like the slow melee, like that slow, deliberate melee combat. I think slow is kind of the way it has to be, if you want to get it to feel as close to what you imagine a sword fight would feel like in real life. And it gives everyone the opportunity to like do that rock paper scissors, that kind of model that we probably first saw in Culling, as far as like multiplayer games go, where you can block, you can swing, you can parry, that kind of thing. And I think that this game, it feels like a lot of ways when I think about it, and watching gameplay of it as it's out now really reminded me that it really reminds me of Chivalry. And then in Chivalry, what was the other one? There's one that is like Chivalry, is third person though. For Honor. Those games, I love those games, but both of them suffer an issue that I think is why this one could, potentially really thrive, and that is Chivalry and For Honor, which are those same like slow, like counter-attacking, melee combat games, don't really have good goals or ones that feel as personally rewarding. Like when
they lack the shell of like the objective of
so
aka extraction looter.
Like in For Honor, for example, there was the game type that I loved, which was a 2v2 like single elimination kind of thing where 2-on-2, one person can die, technically that person could 2v1 the other 2 people, and that's the end of the round, and it was very satisfying.
Uh-oh.
What did you just say? Uh-oh.
Yeah, you froze for about 20 seconds there.
Ah, shit.
Well, I mean, it might be fine, on your end. We're just not going to be able to respond to what you said.
I was
Just cut this whole section out.
Yeah, I can do that. Did I talk about the For Honor like fight?
I
was just saying that in For Honor.
You started on For Honor.
Yeah, there was like a game mode when it was really popular where it was 2v2 elimination, but I found that very quickly that game type died, and everyone was doing a game type that had all of these like hundreds of like minions running around, and you just slice through them to get to a boss and beat the boss, and it was kind of this push and pull like a MOBA, and I was just like, this isn't the satisfying thing I was hoping for. Like, I don't want the chaos. I wanted the deliberate victory of like besting someone in single combat. And then Chivalry was the same thing, but like no one played that game type. They played the one where you're like pushing a fort with hundreds of NPCs again. It's like, y'all have this great idea, but like none of them are giving me that satisfaction. If there was only like single combat mode and it was popular, I'd probably be in there all the time. I love that stuff. But this game seems like it nails it. And I probably will end up getting it and messing with it. I just want to make sure that it's stable given the the stuff surrounding it.
Yeah, I think that's actually kind of a good kicking off point, because the game is a little rough, and because it's a little rough, you really have to change your mindset going into it. Like you said, Warren, it's not a good game to be serious about. Like if you're sweating super hard and you're trying to get all the best loot and extract with everything every single round, and if you're expecting perfect balance, like it's just not there. Like you're gonna have a bad time.
Yeah.
Yeah, which, I agree. We can kick off into, I think we should kick off into the game itself and then maybe finish it with, like, the legal issues.
Yeah.
Just to kind of keep the continuity of, we're talking about the game. I definitely have, criticisms of the game. A lot of things I like about it. Particularly, I like the genre and the idea of it. A melee extraction looter is, like, sounds so hot right now. The devs have been having a really hard time, and we'll get into the legal stuff. But the game's been basically doing like waves of playtests, and they've been a lot of the playtests have been pretty rough. Even one of them you had to download a torrent to torrent the client to play it. It's hard to say like what's going on in the background, but I think the game's got a long way to go. And I think that can be super frustrating. Leaving stability issues aside, which it's kind of suffered from stability issues since its inception in every playtest. I guess we're not in a playtest right now, right? We're like it's launched, but is it what would you call it? Is it early access? What are we?
Yeah, this is the early access with opt-in basically by buying the game.
Yeah. So, they're charging $35 for the game or $50 for, like their collector bundle. And then in the game itself too, they've got microtransactions for classes and skins. Supposedly, I think they're going to be doing away with that and refunding people. I'm not sure exactly what that's going to look like. But basically, it's like you can buy the game. You can buy things in the game. It's more or less, I think, supposed to be launched at this point. Like, I don't believe they're bringing the servers back down. At least they don't plan to, right?
That's my understanding.
Yeah.
And I will say, on their website itself, I had to go through other tabs because I was like, is this game in early access or did they release it? And I had to go to, I had to end up going to the news tab or something like that and scrolling down to see the thing that was like, early access officially launched. When you purchase it, if you went to the website, hit like the buy page or even the about page, you don't get any, like it doesn't really announce itself as a game in early access, which whether or not that's on purpose, I don't see why it would serve them better or worse. But it's just one of those things where there's a lot of flaws. The game's really rough around the edges. And a big part of that is because it is still in early access. Like, it's being actively developed at the time. And maybe they would have taken longer. Maybe the things I had kind of researched on it, watched some videos, breaking stuff down, it seems like it's very, very possible that they launched in this manner to help fund the legal battle. Because IRONMACE we'll get it more into it, but they're in a legal battle with a company much bigger than them. And that company undoubtedly has, hordes of money to throw at this case. And IRONMACE is like a 12-person team or something like that. It's not a big, well-established company. Like those coffers can run dry pretty quick when it comes to this kind of stuff.
This is their only project that I'm aware of.
So I can definitely see this being out now as like they probably scrambled as soon as they could after it got dropped off of Steam to find a publisher, get that ironed out. and then get it out so they can start making some money off of it.
Yeah,
And
and the argument I would make is if what you just said is true, then I think it shows. Which is, I don't know. I don't want to just sit here and like complain to complain or anything because that's not really the point. But I think the game is in a state of suffering, in my opinion. Zell would probably disagree, or maybe he wouldn't. I don't know. We can talk about it. I think that's maybe exactly what we're going to go into. But I think the game's suffering from a lot of issues, balance being one of the large ones. And I would also argue a lot of just the core functionality of the game isn't working in the sense that, you know, I've been one playing a metric ton, and two, I've been consuming a lot of like live streams of people playing, and I've been seeing, like what these, the kind of like upper echelons of players are doing, and it seems like almost every type of PvE challenge in the game, someone has found a way to basically completely like trivialize it. I think just to kind of call out a couple things that I'm aware of, we forgot to mention this, but you have another option besides extracting. You can actually go down to a harder level at the end of a map, which is called going to hell, I think. And in hell, everything's supposed to be much harder, but much more rewards. The videos I'm seeing are people basically going into hell by themselves, and you can do things like, I don't know, it's like some of the creatures, it turns out if you crouch, they literally physically can't attack you. So you can just sit there and, melee punch them 100 times to death and then loot them because they actually can't damage you because you're crouched.
Yeah, and what that could do in a game like this, I would imagine. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but when you're on the main menu of this game, there's a series of shops. So all that money you bring back, you can go into there and purchase items to bring back down with you. So I feel like going in there and getting a bunch of like collecting a bunch of money doesn't sound that crazy until you realize that like that could make it so that one run you go cheese everything, get rich. The next run you're going in fully geared when people just got this game, and giving yourself an unfair advantage, and then you can just keep that loop going. Is that kind of correct? I feel like those shops are pretty loaded up with some good stuff.
So I want to pass some airtime to Zell here, but I just want to say first that that's actually another part that I think we kind of forgot to mention too, is that there's an economy in the game. Just like you mentioned, there's an economy with the NPCs, so you can buy gear, you can gamble gear, you can get really good gear from purchasing, as well as you can buy like medicines to go into the match with, which significantly increase your chance of getting out because you can heal yourself. And then there's also a player-to-player economy. There's trading. You trade items, post them up for sale, other players buy them. So more gold means more gear, better gear, more healing, so on and so forth. Very heavily economy-based game, but by all means, please, Zell. We've said a lot.
No. I think it's all accurate. There are merchants in the starting menu, like you said, Warren. Most of their things are pretty pricey, so I think that's kind of the exchange that they want you to do. They want you to spend extra money on a sword if you're going to go in with the sword, or things of that nature. To talk about the points of cheesing the PvE, I think some of it might have been intended, and I think some of it is definitely accidental. I've intentionally been not watching Dark and Darker content because I don't want my perspective skewed in that way. Like, I don't want to see the cheesing. I don't want to know how to just like, trivialize every boss mob. But when I first played, I had seen things like, oh, if you get on a staircase and crouch, if there's a height difference, the mobs have a really hard time hitting you. Where I kind of don't know where I want that to land is that if everything was just like the monster's going to swing and it's always going to connect with you, I feel like what that does is that forces metas, right? You can no longer ever have a chance in hell unless you have a tank up front, you have a healer behind him, and you have someone buffing or someone doing range damage. So I do think that there's a happy middle ground where it's like, hey, if you lure them to a certain part of the room, it's okay that they're not one-shotting you. But being able to crouch in front of them and them not being able to hit you, that sounds like a bug to me that needs to be fixed. And it will drastically impact the rounds and the like how the player base interacts with the game, because they drop significantly better loot, a lot more gold, and it will make those players come in much stronger.
Right, which for the criticism I'm giving of the game, I think everything that I'm criticizing and I'm going to criticize is correctable. Um, Not to say that my opinion is correct necessarily, but it's just my opinion and what I think they should do. Um, my concern is, I love competitive games. I love being competitive in games. In a game like this where there's going to be leaderboards and there is this economy and every map I load into is full of other players and the economy of those players matters for my chances to be able to fight them, right? Um, I just want to see a playing field when I drop into a map. I know that the chances that every player in there did a bunch of exploits and they now have thousands and thousands and thousands of more gold than I could possibly have just playing regularly. Therefore, all their gear is better, all that type of thing. Like, I don't want that to be a factor, right?
Hmm.
I think anyone that's playing like a PvP competitive game wants to feel like the playing field is relatively even. It'll never be exactly even, right? Because there is an economy, there can be gold differences, level differences, etc. Um, but there's like a certain, I think, threshold of like acceptableness to that. I would just love to see, when season one drops, that they've addressed all this stuff. And I think probably really where I think kind of the apex of all my complaints are gonna, kind of meet at is I feel like I don't know how well the devs are communicating with the community. For instance, I cannot find any literature anywhere that has like the quote unquote patch notes of what happened between the last playtest and the release of this early access. And I know a lot's changed. I pick up like tidbits from streamers where they're like, oh yeah, stealth has been reworked, or, oh yeah, you can no longer stack potions, like all this type of stuff. But I'm like, why aren't the devs telling us what they've changed? Or if they have, like, where is it? Maybe I'm just missing it. Maybe it is obvious somewhere, but I haven't found it. And I've looked. I've Googled, Dark and Darker patch notes, Dark and Darker changes. I've looked in YouTube, and it's like, I'm getting nothing, man. I'm getting nothing but people just, like, speculating from what they've found. And that's been really hard to deal with, too, because it's like, I'm walking into the early access with what I knew to be true from the last playtest, and it's like, I don't know if those things are still valid or not. I don't know. So it's hard for me to like tell what's going on when I'm getting murdered. Um,
I feel like that's an industry problem, not just a Dark and Darker problem. Like even Diablo 4, they leave stuff out of their patch notes all the time, and it's like up until recently when the community complained about it, they weren't even releasing their patch notes until like the day of the patch, and they were like incomplete. But you're right, you can't just Google the patch notes for Dark and Darker. Because it's a small team, I think that their marketing is definitely a little bit of a struggle, and we can talk about the release too. But pretty much all of the information in the game is in their Discord. That's where you would find out that it's early access. That's where you'd find most of the patch notes, and that's where the devs are doing like all their communication.
See, I've even checked their Discord for patch notes, and I can't find anything.
Yeah, maybe I'm missing it there. I'll have to look
But
again.
but either way, all of it just to stand to say, right, that the game's early access. To me, it feels like early access, and that is frustrating when you compound it with what I perceive to be a lack of communication for what's going on. And I realize as I'm saying this, I feel like I'm starting to sound like the Diablo 4 players that I that I was critical of, because it's like, these entitled gamers. But for what the game is and the state that it's in, and it's a very, would you say that it feels beta to you?
Yeah, I mean the game's definitely not complete. It's
Yeah.
not feature complete. I wouldn't purchase it expecting it to be feature complete, because you're just gonna be disappointed.
That's a good call out. That's a good call out. So Yeah, I don't really know where else I'd want to go there other than, I don't know. I guess I don't have like a burning need to like run down an entire list of things that I think they need to fix, but I just think it's worth calling out, especially for anyone considering purchasing the game. It's worth noting that it is early access, and it very much is early access. Um, I think they have like the Warlock is out now, and it's labeled as like an incomplete class. Um, and there's pieces of classes that are missing currently, like the what is it called, like the skill tree, is that what it is?
Yeah, it might be skill tree, attribute tree, something like that. Yeah, so to be the other side of that coin, if you go into the game with these expectations and you're like, hey, I'm just going to have fun with it, I'm not going to take it super serious, I know there's imbalance, I'm having an absolute blast with it, man. This game does something really well that I talk about from time to time, and it's like skill expression, where it's like you can play the game your way. And I really, really like that. Like, most rogue players, you're going to see them all play a little bit differently. Like, some players will just sit in corners and stealth and like camp portals, or other rogue players will take off all their armor so they can move as fast as possible, and then like whenever they engage with people, they're like baiting moving into barbarians, so they take their really slow axe swing and then they come in behind it and like start stabbing people. So it does this thing where it's like it really kind of lets you customize your class, and because there are so many classes, you have like so many options in the game. And I mean, even options with like weapons and armor, and like the amount of things they let you experiment with, it has been so much fun.
Warren, you were frozen for probably like over 40 seconds there. I don't know if you had spoken or at all or not, but if you did, I would say get in there now.
Haven't spoken. Haven't spoken.
Okay.
Don't worry. I will upload the one where you can see me listening intently and then muting myself to tell my dog to stop trying to smash her wet nose into me.
Yeah, we had you frozen on screen like this for like 40 seconds.
I do that. I
Perfect.
was just in a defensive posture just in case. No. Yeah, I'm gonna get it. I think. I think I'll probably end up getting it. I'm not gonna see it as something that I want to get in there and grind and get super deep into. Maybe I do. I doubt it. But I'll definitely see it as something that if one or both of you is on, kind of thing, and you're willing to drag someone through the dungeon that is definitely going to be a detriment, I'd be happy to be there. It's
Yeah,
I see it as a fun party kind of game.
it definitely can be, and I would say, probably, again, I know I have a lot of negative perspectives here, but probably I think a discredit to the game is I don't think there's any kind of matchmaking. So to bring on a third person or a second person actually doesn't negatively impact you in any way whatsoever in matchmaking, in lobbies, like at all. So there is no negative to bring in another person, none whatsoever.
It's pretty much only positive, except for maybe the fact that you guys have to get more loot to fill your inventories before you leave.
Yeah.
So okay, we can talk about some of the gameplay more. I certainly have more I could complain about. Which, for the record, I'm having fun. I am having fun. I'm very critical of the fun I'm having, but I am having it. Do we want to dive into all this legal drama that we've been kind of teasing around?
Yeah, sure. You want me to take a stab at it? I feel like I'm pretty fresh on it now.
You're probably the most neutral party.
Yeah, you're probably the most neutral.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So this game has just launched its early access. It's had a series of beta tests, but in this launch is almost a response to a situation that's going on where the developer was originally part of the company Nexon, which you may know them for very little, but pretty much just MapleStory, I think, is like their big
one.
cash cow, and it has been since I think I was in middle school. Like, this thing's been around for a minute. Well, that company had been developing a game just under a project name P3, and at the time, one of the I think he actually was the lead. I didn't bring his name up. If you know it, I'll take it, but I'll just
I
call
think
him the
it's
guy.
Choi.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he.
I think there's a Terry and there's a.
Yeah, there's like the two main ones, but essentially, he had been either fired or quit from the company. I can't remember. I think it was just like kind of a parting, and quit and started his own company, and immediately began development on Dark and Darker, which, according to Nexon, it bears striking similarity to the game, the P3 project they were working on. And so Nexon, filed a lawsuit against IRONMACE, which is the company that that developer, broke off and created. But there's a little bit more. There's a lot of little pieces to that, where they're suing over basically issues of claiming that this person had been keeping their assets on private servers, and then claiming that they were using those assets and industry insider knowledge to create Dark and Darker, essentially saying you quit and now you're pulling this game out from under us and putting it out yourself, and people like it. And each one of those points has like 1,000 caveats to it, but that's the long short of it, is that this person broke off from the company, took some of the employees with them, and started developing a game that the parent, the original company, Nexon, claimed was already making. And so that's where we land. So obviously you got a lot of people that love Dark and Darker because it's bringing this new thing to the table, are supporting it.
Rick, do you want to just like fill in the gaps from your perspective based off of what he just said?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, hopefully he can hear us right now. He is frozen. I don't know if he's aware that he's frozen. So I'll just pick up here. Yeah, so the individual, I think his name might have been Choi. I don't want to use the name though because I don't remember if that's exactly him or not. So the guy, he departs and is allegedly had allegedly basically poached employees with him off the project, and the group of them, found Iron Mace and create Dark and Darker. As Warren mentioned, Nexon alleges that Dark and Darker is essentially P3. From Nexon's point of view, they would argue these guys literally took the game files, took source code, took the assets, and then developed what we were developing in P3. I don't think we're gonna throw up any of the court documents or anything, but I think one of the first documents we see from Nexon, they do a lot of side-by-side comparisons of this is Dark and Darker, this is P3, and look how similar they are. Some of it maybe is a little bit of a stretch, but personally looking at it, I think a lot of it looks pretty damning to me. I think the individual that left Nexon is very much on record as having been basically a disgruntled employee. It's 100% factually known that he did have the game's files on his private server. What's not necessarily clear is whether or not he was allowed to or not. It sounds like maybe he was allowed to at one point. That may have gotten revoked.
Am I back?
Warren looks like yes,
You're
are
back.
back.
So what the thing that I was reading on was basically saying that the company didn't had to essentially warned him when found out he was doing that, and his defense was that his servers were working better than the ones they had established to do that exact same thing. They told him to stop. He said okay, and then COVID pushed them to remote work, and he started doing it again. Basically just said yours aren't good enough, I need to do this. So basically saying, yes, I went against what they said, but my intentions were not malicious, and I did not use that stuff for Dark and Darker. That was his claim. It was yeah, I did this, but it was just so I could work more efficiently from home.
Yeah, which of course that's his perspective, right? And
Yeah.
and I can't speak from either perspective. I don't know the facts necessarily, but Nexon alleges that at one point in time, he was explicitly told, you know, you may not do this, and he did.
Yeah.
And in fact, I think they had ordered a subpoena of those, of that server to see whether or not P3's files were basically copied off of it, and allegedly he had an employee permanently either damage or wipe the server after agreeing to hand it over, which also I think looks very damning. Now this is Nexon's allegations. We don't know if that's exactly how it went down. I think he has a counter argument. It may or may not be valid. I don't know. All of this to kind of spin into Dark and Darker was created, it was launched, it was, going through these play tests. The reason it started running into big issues is because along with the lawsuit, a DMCA strike was issued because the game was on Steam. And that was like the big point when I think the game started getting a lot of real big public attention. The DMCA strike took it down, and that was big because the game was starting to gather a lot of popularity amongst Melee BR enthusiasts. Which is then you start to see the rise of this hold the line meme and all these pro IRONMACE people, pro Dark and Darker people, but what could be a reality is Dark and Darker could basically be stolen property, which I think there's a lot of interesting things we can kind of get into from there. I would probably pass this to Zell at this point to say, is there any other caveats of the cases, the case that you want to bring up, or just something you want to roll into?
Before diving into caveats, could I say, just because it tags kind of directly onto that last point you made, that I feel like I don't know if the video said this. I don't think I'm parroting other people, but it feels like this was the game release was to maybe do two things. One, fund the case because they're being sued by a huge corporation. But I don't even know it's sued, but they have a case against them. But also, I mean, it's one of those things where if Dark and Darker gets rolling, and then you have this company of 12 or so people that rely on that as their primary means of income. Now that the game's out and funneling money back into the company, that's another thing that IRONMACE can pull, even if they lose at the end, and be like, hey, please don't shut it down. Like, can we keep going, because people rely on this. Like that's like a legitimate thing that they could do with courts to say like, hey, don't stop this because it's necessary for people that are innocent, and then get sued or whatever, have some kind of repercussions, but then still be able to stay afloat. But yeah, if you want to start diving into any of those details and give some more context, that'd be awesome. Zell. XP.
Yeah. So I'll start off by saying, one, I have no real strong love for Nexon or IRONMACE. I love the game. I don't care who releases it. I just want to be able to play it. So that's kind of my stance going into this. Now, I will also say that the majority of the videos that showcase the legal documents that I watched was very biased towards IRONMACE. So I tried to take that with as much grains of salt as possible, but sometimes it's hard. My opinion was definitely swayed one way more than the other. So the videos that I watched said basically that Nexon had given, I think his name's Terry, but we'll just say the lead developer, permission to download stuff onto the servers during the COVID remote work at home thing. And then towards the end of COVID, they demanded that he no longer worked on those servers, and my understanding is that he continued to. Maybe it is based on that it was just more efficient, or maybe he just said, this is mine now, I'm running with it. Some important context, though. Terry I'll stop using the name because I don't think it's right. The guy had worked for about, he said it was 5 to 7 projects with Nexon. These kind of unique ideas that he came up with, and Nexon 86 to all of them. None of the games that he was leading Nexon ever released. And I think and this is me just putting my personal, spin on it, but I could see a world where this guy delivered a genius idea, realized how good it was going to be, realized that Nexon was probably going to 86 it again, and ran off to do it himself. Legal
Yeah.
case wise, everything else you guys mentioned, I think is probably pretty accurate. There's definitely allegations that one of the employees that came over to Iron Mace literally copy pasted their asset packages before he came over. That was one of the things that was said in there.
Yeah.
Another one was, I did hear that there was some sort of audit to go check the servers, and the servers were wiped before they got there. Now, I don't know if those servers were wiped because the audit was coming, or he wiped the servers earlier according to the job and the restrictions. I'm not really sure of that. I don't know if that's been proven yet. What other important context? Kind of like you guys said, the lead developer, I believe he did quit, and before he quit, he poached it was like 6 to 10 employees, something like that.
Damn, I didn't know it was that many.
I think it was something like that. Yeah. And on another one, there's like two main ones. One was like the lead designer, and the other one was like the lead programmer. Those are like the two guys that they're really bringing up a lot in these cases. But I don't know, if you just like take a step back from the lawsuit, like I could totally see like two guys at work come up with a genius idea, deliver it to the Nexon's a $4 billion company, by the way. So it's like, you're not
Nothing to them. Yeah.
yeah. And then you're just like, oh my God, they're going to ruin this. Like they're going to put a shit ton of like microtransactions in it. This game is going to get destroyed. We're not going to be able to build it our way. Let's get out of here. I can also see the asset duplication. And Warren, you have a little bit of context on this now, but the asset duplication is really complicated because anyone can go to the asset store and purchase the exact same assets.
Public assets. I think I think the asset thing is something that a lot of the pro Iron Mace side is latching onto and being like, oh, they're mad about the torches. It's like, I think it's a little deeper than that. You guys are just finding the one fucking ace in the hole, like, not a big deal thing. And I think that's what a lot of the biased conversation angles towards. I don't think the asset thing is really something that's going to have legs. Like, they've pretty much said, like, all these things are public assets that you see in a lot of early access games because it's right there on the asset
Well,
store.
I think there's another layer of nuance to that, though, right? I think people that are willing to make a dishonest argument, which I think there are, no one's on Team Nexon. Like, let's be clear, right? No one's on Team Nexon because Nexon's the big guy and Iron Mace is the little guy, and a lot of people love Dark and Darker, so they're on Team Iron Mace, and that's fine. But I think
Fair.
having that perspective has no bearing on truth or facts, right? And I think a lot of people are willing to take bad faith arguments because it favors their team, right? So what do I mean by that? When it comes to the asset argument, a lot of people latched onto that to say, oh, this is a really stupid argument because you can go onto the store and I can go buy all these same assets too right now and make a game using all the same assets. That's not the argument, though, that, as I understand it, that Nexon was making. That's a disingenuous way to represent the argument that they were making.
Yeah.
The argument that they were, to my understanding, making is that, yes, these assets are all publicly available to people to go and purchase. However, there is an intellectual copyright, that is to say, this exact set of assets arranged in this exact way, in this style, becomes, I believe, like intellectual property, or becomes a copyrighted, trademarkable thing. It's not that they have the rights to those assets, it's that they hypothetically have some kind of legal rights to those assets,
That package.
that package arranged in a certain way, used in a certain way, right? And that I think is the crux of their argument, which I think has a little bit more weight to it. Now, I don't know how valid it is, right? None of us are legal experts. Like, let's be super clear, right? None of us are legal experts. We have no idea.
Hey.
But that type of argument, I think it has more weight than the kind of not really good faith argument of
Well, I could go buy them. Yeah. I was.
Yeah.
Let me complete my thought though, because I wasn't done. What I was gonna say is, I'm not gonna argue that that was right or wrong as far as like the purchasing of the assets goes. But what I could see as these guys both being the lead developers is they chose all these assets. You know what I mean? When they were at Nexon,
Yeah.
they worked for months going through all the skeleton frames, all the torch frames to choose their favorite ones. And I could totally see how you leaving a project after spending 6 months choosing your favorite skeleton, you know, you start your own project and you choose that skeleton again. I totally get that. Now, legally, probably not the right decision, but, you know, from a human perspective, I get it.
And you know what? I love this part of. This is probably my favorite part of all of it because I think I have two distinctly different perspectives when you ask from the perspective of morally versus the perspective of legally, because they're two different worlds. The picture that you painted, I think, is actually really great in that, you know, this guy, he's got this great idea and he's at Nexon and he's building it up, and I think this is probably the fundamental flaw. He's building it while getting a paycheck from Nexon to build it. And maybe you're right. Maybe he sees that's going to get 86, but this is a genius idea, so he's like, F this, I'm out. I'm going to go build it solo. Morally and ethically, that makes a lot of sense, and that makes him like kind of a Robin Hood, right? Like he's choosing to go do the greater good in the world. Legally though, right? Being a game developer and being funded by a company to create a game, you enter into legally binding agreements, right? Like you couldn't go and get a job at Blizzard and start working on their WoW 2 and then at some point like, all right, I'm out, and then go build exactly what they're building. Like you can't do that. You're legally prohibited from doing so. So it's like, I think that they probably, I don't know. I think that they probably broke some laws. I think that they probably crossed legal boundaries. But ethically and morally, I understand why they did it, and it is on a human level, it's relatable and, you know, honestly forgivable.
Yeah,
Morally.
I think Robin Hood was a great way to describe that. But so just to touch on that portion, because there's another caveat there that's legally versus breaking Nexon's contract. So, and I don't understand this fully. My wife did go to law school, so we've kind of like dabbled in it a little bit, and hopefully there's a lawyer that watches this that can correct us. But I guess there is some sort of law that governs around intellectual property where if the person that is in charge of creating the intellectual property leaves a company and the company could not recreate that same level of effort, the law actually sides with the person that left with that idea. And I know I'm not doing a good job of describing that, but it's like if someone within a company comes up with an idea and they are so critical to the source of that idea being successful that they leave and the company is no longer able to make that idea successful, the law actually tends to side with the person
with the
that
creative
left.
mind behind it.
I
I
think
can see that. It's weird that the law stands with that, but that's cool. I mean, it's cool. It's interesting.
Yeah, I'm definitely a little sus of it, but I don't know. I don't know. That also sounds like a legal nightmare to try to like untangle and prove one way or another, because it's so like it seems
that's
so intangible.
something that like Nexon just can fund, that the ability to do that, to bury IRONMACE for the transgression of you left and thought you could just do this thing and be better. Like, we're gonna bury you. Like, we're gonna bury you in litigations that are gonna put you under, that you won't be able to fund, and we can fund any of it because we're multi-billion. Like, it is one of those things where, like, in those situations you can see why you'd be like, I want to root for the little guy, obviously. Like this dude made a cool game, didn't think it was gonna go anywhere, fucking underdog story, like, screw this, I'm gonna start something better and put you guys out of business, and like walks out and they're, who's coming with me, all that kind of shit. And like, that's what this story actually is. But it's just like, well, what did he take with him? You gotta look like, you stormed out, but you had a box in your hands. What was in the box?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think I'm not sure like how severe Nexon's argument is, but at least early on, the impression I was getting was that they basically walked out with the blueprint of P3, and then used that blueprint plus all the assets and all these other things, right, to create Dark and Darker, which like legally it looks really bad, potentially, allegedly.
Yeah. I'd say it
you know,
really. Oh, sorry.
well, I was going to say, one extra layer of complication that we should mention too is that this company, all of this is in Korea.
Mhm.
100% of what's happening is in Korea. This is a Korean company, Korean people, Korean everything. The only part of it that exists in the U.S. was the DMCA takedown, which was for Steam, which is a Seattle thing. So, last I checked, they were actually fighting a U.S. legal battle and a Korea legal battle.
And the U.S. one's done, right?
I don't know.
I want to say that one's finished, and it's just Korea now. They put out all the like written text. That was what people were going off of for the videos I was watching. Like 4
I don't
days
think
ago.
I don't think it's finished because it's not back up on Steam.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, the last thing I saw was that the injunction in Korea failed, which actually is very important. But I'm not 100% sure on that. I'll need someone to fact check me. But my understanding was that the injunction in Korea failed, which is what allowed them to like kind of move forward with this. And then on top of that, they seem very confident that the California law case is not going to hold up for the DMCA. So again, I don't know if that's them just fluffing up their position and they just panic release this to try to get some money to be able to battle it or what. But yeah, to your point, the U.S. lawsuit is important because that is contingent on them being able to release on Steam or not, which at this point I actually don't know how much that matters because they built their own launcher. I think they've seen great success, at least financially. But yeah, it would have been really nice if this was on Steam. So that was definitely a devastating move.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think not being on Steam is going to severely hinder their prospects. I mean, their outreach, right? Like, Steam would put a new release on their front page, and you have your Steam reviews, your Steam friends list, who's playing. I mean, that I would argue that it's inarguable that if it was on Steam, it would have far, far, far greater outreach.
Oh,
It would
I mean,
probably
yeah.
have,
Steam is Steam. Like hell, you could be playing that shit on playing on your Steam Deck on your couch.
I do wish I could tell how many concurrent players there are. That's some Steam data that I'm really missing out on right now because it was like, I remember I was sitting in Dark and Darker on Twitch that the day that they said they were going to release it, and it was like Lyric was sitting there with 27,000 people watching him, trying to jump in, and there was just all these like, there was probably 100,000 people in there that day. Half of them bought this game. They're doing pretty
I was
good.
gonna say anybody that was looking out for this game and waiting for it, I would imagine they own it right now. If you were
Probably.
waiting for this game, there's no way you saw this going on and were like, I'm gonna wait. Like me, I'm not really someone who was looking out for it at all. So when you're like, it dropped, I was like, aren't they being sued or some shit? Like I wasn't tracking any of it. So
Yeah.
I don't.
Man, dude, I was waiting for the game. Not as probably as on the edge of my seat as Zell. But I want the game to succeed very badly, which is I think partially what fuels how critical I am of it, because my fear is that it can, like the Melee BRs that have come before it, it has the chance to perish before it becomes what it's destined to become. So I'm very fearful of that. Zell called out a point that it's like, if you go into it, you expect it to be balanced, you expect it to be not janky, you're gonna have a bad time. I can kind of take that, but I also kind of reject some of that too. In that, I want to see positive, measurable, communicated strides in the right direction so that it can survive, because I would argue, in its current state, it just doesn't have enough to keep it.
You think it's
keep it
being
on its
carried
legs.
by that core concept, that core thing that people find fun? It's. I feel like we've seen this with a lot of games. I mean, I think Culling was probably one of them, right? Where you have this amazing concept. It's good, like ace in the hole. Like this should be a smash success, and then somehow you just make continuous bad decisions that piss everybody off over and over again. It's just like having this weird disconnect from your audience, even though like they're resonating with the thing you created in the first place, and then you run it into the ground. I don't know what's going on with culling or what happened with it and how culling 2 came out and was just
That's
like
a whole episode. That's a whole episode.
you know what I mean?
Don't-
Like, but
we don't
just
talk
knowing
about
that
that.
companies just like
We don't talk about
somehow there's
he
things
frozen?
that just
I
do
don't
Oh,
not.
what a perfect frozen face.
That is unfortunate.
I'm not using whatever feed you're using.
Yeah,
so
you know this could be the H1Z1. This could be the H1Z1 of PvP, PvE, melee, BR looter extraction type games. H1Z1 opened up the door to the genre. It was really fun for like a year, and then bigger companies with more assets and more talented teams recreated it better. And I hope that's not the case, because I see the potential here. And I mean, just to the point that Warren was making just now, last playtest, Red and I both suffered through this, but they introduced a new map where they didn't put any like restrictions on where you could get in the map. And then they gave rogues double jump, and it was like all of a sudden you could completely break this map and just like get on top of it to the point where players couldn't see you, and there's no fall damage. So it was like you were just like falcon diving like 14 stories from the sky on top of people, and there was just like really nothing you could do about it. So
Yeah.
that was a
and
really weird
they had
decision.
crossbows too.
Yeah, that was a really weird decision. I'm not sure if that was like something they were working on and then they decided to like just test it via the play test, and that was like the first time anyone ever played it, but it seemed very obvious that it was going to be a problem, and I'm not sure where that decision came from.
Yeah, you're unfrozen now, by the way, Warren. Welcome back.
Thank you. Happy to be here. I'm gonna use my feed, by the way, so
Yeah.
it's just gonna have you guys yelling at me every now and then for no reason while I'm talking. I'm like, yeah, so
I'm
when
talking
you're,
right through you.
you're like, you look stupid. You're like, okay.
You actually froze while you were doing that.
Fuck!
So,
Let me know when I'm back, please.
You're back.
You're back.
You're back.
Uh,
That was a quick stutter, but that was kind of funny. Maybe it's when you start getting loud with your actions that it freezes. Get a little.
You're telling me to calm down.
why don't you
Maybe.
quiet down over there?
Yeah, pipe down.
Calm down, man.
So let's take this argument all the way to the end, right? And this I think is also as interesting as the whole legal battle itself. Whether or not IRONMACE is found guilty and they're guilty of everything they're accused of, or whether or not the case gets thrown out, I'm not actually sure, and I don't think anyone is, because to my knowledge there's very much like a lack of precedence to say, even worst case scenario, we don't know what the consequences would be. That is to say, right, even if IRONMACE is absolutely the books thrown at them, they were wrong on all counts, that could be anything from the game gets shut down, they hand all their money over to Nexon, like apocalyptic for them. Or it could be, here's a small fine. Or it could be, slap on the wrist, don't do it again. Or it could, like, there's just this whole array of, like, punishments that it could be. Or case thrown out. And it almost makes, like, the argument of the legal battle itself kind of almost a moot point. Because what happens if we get to the end of this? IRONMACE is told, you did bad. Pay $10,000 and be on your way, and you get to keep making the game. It would have basically all been for nothing.
Yeah, it's a good point, because I went back as my wife was going through the videos. I had her start on those because she's got that law background, and I actually think that in the initial lawsuit, Nexon is suing for damages, which I think just means it's a fine. Even if they're found guilty, I think it's just a hefty fine.
Yeah, it's like, what damages do you guys have? Can you project out success?
And that is actually a crucial point, because if they are suing for damages, they then have to be able to produce, well, what is the state of P3? How much money would you have made over the next year or 2 years of the game? And so it gets really complex, because it's like, well, P3 really wasn't in a place where they could release it yet. So it's like, what are the damages? Like, if you weren't going to make money on it for another 3 years, how much do you get paid? But I'm not. Again, I'm not 100% sure on that, and I hope that someone corrects me if that's incorrect. But I
Sound
think
off in
they're
the
just suing
comments.
for damages. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Which I think that's going to be just the real kick in the ass at the end of all this legal drama is just finding out like, all right, what's going to happen? Because all this like what's probably going to turn into years of legal battles could just boil down to pay some inconsequential amount of money and that's it.
You were bad.
Or Nexon gets to absorb Dark and Dark. Like I don't know, man. Who knows?
be
That would be
interesting.
wild.
That'd be
Yeah.
interesting. They just get control over it as publisher. Like, take
Yeah,
it
I
on
don't
and
know.
let Iron Mace develop and they publish.
And that's what I mean by like lack of precedence. Like I don't know if there's a ton of cases like this that are like on record, or at least that were like fought all the way through. I think there's probably a lot of cases where big company bullied small company out, and small company just couldn't fight it.
Yeah, there was a small one, or I say small. There was one with Fortnite v PUBG.
You're frozen.
Yeah, you're currently frozen. I think it actually mentions it in one of the videos.
Hello?
You're back.
You're back.
You're
yeah.
back.
I was gonna say Fortnite v PUBG was one that came to
Immediately
mind.
frozen.
Yeah. You're no longer back. But yeah, it was like a Street Fighter. I think they mentioned one of the videos. It was like someone copied Street Fighter, and then I think they had to pay them like a percentage of their revenue moving forward or something like that.
Oh, like
which-
permanently?
I think so. I think that's what they said in the video. It's been a long time. There's a lot of
Yeah.
videos, but
See, that would be interesting because I would argue if Iron Mace is found legally culpable for basically stealing P3, but ultimately Iron Mace gets to keep Dark and Darker and it's successful and they just have to pay a percentage of the revenue to Nexon, I would almost argue that's, kind of fair. If
Yeah.
they truly stole it from Nexon, right?
yeah. If
Like
they're
that-
found guilty, I would say that's fair. Yeah. I mean,
Um,
honestly, though, they would probably just offer to acquire them and then just have Iron Mace work as like a branch underneath
They
Nexon
ain't
or
hi-
something.
they ain't hiring that dude back. You are back, Warren.
I don't want to talk. It's gonna make me go away again.
Red, I do want to trigger you once here,
I'm
and I
ready.
just want to I want to get your thoughts and opinions on this
Trigger him.
because I'm triggering him. So I think a lot of the complaints. There's one class in specific in the game that I think it like really rubs you the wrong way, and I think it has been your interactions with the rogue class. Is that fair to say?
I would say two classes I think are really problematic.
Uh-huh.
I think Rogue is really problematic and Cleric is really problematic.
Yeah, cleric's weird because like not only is cleric strong, but also you and I, the healing in general in video games, I think we're starting to push against,
Yeah.
which is weird and it's very meta breaking, and I think we're probably in the 0.0001% that doesn't really love healing in video games. But I do want to ask you more about the rogue.
hmm
Because I do think that a small piece of your frustration with that class is that I think that you're playing classes that are specifically hard countered by rogue. What's your opinion on that?
I think, yeah, when I was playing Ranger and I was playing Wizard to start off this launch, I would agree. I think those are the favorite yummy targets of the Rogue. Which, kind of sucks because it's like, in a lot of ways, it just feels like there's nothing I can do. I think when I feel like I had no counterplay options to an engagement, that's when I feel bad about the game. When I'm engaged in a PvP interaction and whether or not my hands are on my mouse and keyboard or up here, the outcome is the same and there's nothing I can do. That's when I feel like something's wrong and it feels bad. Now, what I will concede though is a lot of Dark and Darker's combat, as I kind of mentioned earlier, isn't necessarily about what you're doing in the fight, but the chess game strategy even leading up to the fight is really important. If you're one of these squishy classes and a rogue is at your doorstep, you lost the fight already. It's too late. The fight with the rogue took place before he ever got to you. Now what's hard, right, is like rogue can stealth. Rogue can move while stealth. Rogue can double jump. Rogue has, I think if I were to boil down the number one complaint I have about Rogue is their mobility is game-breakingly, in my opinion, stronger than all the other classes.
Yeah, Rogue is definitely not only a good class, it's a very strong class at the moment. It has incredible mobility, and you've been playing the classes that kind of get countered by Rogue, so it's just like the uber perfect stew for disappointment. I think the counter to Rogue is, in your situation, is you have to have a fighter or a barbarian to step between you, and that's your counter. And we don't play those, so I think to your point, it's like you really don't have any options. If you walk into a room and there's a rogue stealth there, like, you're just dead.
Hey, if I play, I wanted to do fighter or barbarian, just so you know.
Oh, that
You should.
you're coming in tonight then.
Just throwing that
You're
up,
coming
throwing
in
that out there.
tonight. Yeah.
Um,
Fighter's amazing.
I-
You'll really like it.
I am apprehensive to talk. I know that sucks, but it's true. But I think in a perfect world for me, a game like this that has solos there should be a fully kitted of any class should be able to fight the fully kitted of another class. There should always be plays, maybe even if that's specific perks you need, and so that when you're going in, you're kind of being like, okay, so this time around, I am ready for rogues because I have this and this, but now I'm at a disadvantage for this. That's fine. I think that taking those kind of swings is okay, but I think that would be. I think that it does sound awful that it's like you see a rogue and you're like,
Well,
damn.
if you see the rogue, you might be okay, but the problem is you can't see him.
yeah.
Yeah, and again, I would really bundle up my criticism of the rogue with being the fact that they can get more vertical than any other class. They're the fastest moving class, and they also hit like a truck.
Yeah. I think
It's just
balance.
it's just too much. They have too much of everything. So something's got to go. Either they need to not do all the damage that they're doing, or their mobility needs to be brought back down to earth, because invisibility, double jump, fastest movement speed, and doing a ton of damage, it's too oppressive.
A single imbalance, I feel like, can kill the experience for a lot of people. Maybe not as a whole, but
Sorry, Warren, you froze again.
let me know when I'm back. Let me know
Just
when I'm back.
just to touch on a couple things there, because I know the rogue mains will crush me if I don't just touch on a couple things you said. Rogue cannot inherently move while stealthed. They have to choose a perk for it, which allows them to take 10 steps while invisible. So I know it's really nitpicking, but I do think it's important to call out that it's like, well, if you know the game perfectly, it's like, okay, there's a rogue stealth over there because I saw him stealth. He can only move 10 steps in one direction, and he's pinned to the ground. I don't know why they gave rogues double jump. As a rogue main, I will say that it feels unnecessary. I felt fine without double jump, and honestly, I'm kind of surprised it's still in.
Yeah, compounding it with the fact that a lot of the kind of the quote unquote cheese that you can do in the game is related to the verticality. So going back to how you can trivialize a lot of hell monsters and things like that. A lot of it has to do with you can double jump onto a torch on the wall, and there's just the AI just can't respond. They'll just stand there. And then honestly, it's the same thing with a lot of players. A barb, you're fighting a barb, and then you're like, this isn't going my way. It's like, oh, I'll just double jump onto a torch, and that's it. That's it. You've won.
That's a good point. Yeah, there's definitely some height that you can get to where the melee classes actually don't have a ranged way to deal with you. You're just kind of stuck up there.
Yeah, I proposed it in the Discord that I think it's a solvable issue, and that's
Mhm.
either anywhere where there's like verticality that a player can get to. I think there just needs to either be a path to it or a way to destroy that vertical object. Like
Oh, that's a good idea.
like you're up on some boxes. Well, the mobs will then hit the box to knock you down, or there's a path up there. I think that solves it. So I just think some more thought needs to go into, let's block off things that should be inaccessible, paths to things that we want to be accessible, or have destructible interactions available to melee classes and NPCs.
Yeah, I think that's a really good call. I like the destructible option, and that actually kind of loops me back around to a couple other things I wanted to mention. One of the things we haven't talked about that I think is like really crucial to you and me liking the game is that there's loot rarity, and
Yes.
that's always a really big thing for me. So the items can drop. Basically, gray has the worst version of themselves, white slightly better, green a little bit more, blue, purple, and I think there's even like an orange, which is like a unique type one. Also, Warren had mentioned if there's a solo version of the game, that everything needs to be balanced to be able to solo, and it's a great point. And the reason I wanted to talk about it was because solo wasn't actually not originally part of the game. Um, the solo goblin caves were added like 2 playtests ago as like a last minute test to give people, because a lot of people wanted to solo, so they kind of like created that map and threw it in last minute because they wanted to provide for that, for the demand there. But yeah, solo has not been ironed out. I don't think it's been one of their main focal points, and honestly I'm not sure if it's going to be.
I'm okay with that. I respect that. If it's made to be a team game, I'm okay with certain classes not holding a candle as long as there are more than one solution. Like, yeah, if you have to run warrior, cleric, bard to be viable, that sucks. But as long
Yeah.
as there's various compositions that work, I think it's okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, and I can also concede that, right? Like I don't envision a world where every class can 1v1 every other class. That's going to be completely fair and balanced. But I also don't think in this type of game you can just say, well, it's going to be unbalanced, so it is what it is. Have fun with it anyways. Like I don't think that's enough, right? You have to do some amount of like due diligence and justice to try to bring some semblance of balance to the game, even if you're balancing it around team compositions, because otherwise, you just end up with every team must run class X, and that
Mm-hmm.
that is the type of meta I think that sucks ass.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
agree.
Yeah,
you know,
100%.
yeah. How many games have we played where it's like, you can't do anything unless you've got the warrior tank up front, and then no one wants to play the warrior. You know what I mean? And then you got
Yeah.
20-minute queues. It's just not a fun thing. Like, giving players more agency is better, in my opinion. So it's just something I think that I hope that they keep in mind going forward, before things collapse into one ironclad meta that just can't be contended with.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah,
There's only one.
100%.
There's only one last point I wanted to touch on. I think we covered everything else that I was like super stoked to talk about. But yeah, back to the cheesing of the PVE mobs. I put a lot of thought into that, and while I still think that they do need to do some tuning, I don't think that the PVE mobs are supposed to be the main threat, right? Like the reason hell is being so abused right now is because there's no players there. Like guys are able to go there solo and they never run into anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, okay, well now they get to use the entire map to find that cheesable corner or that cheesable torch. And honestly, if those were full, it wouldn't matter if they were cheesing the mobs or not, because guess what? You just cheese that mob for me, because I'm gonna take your loot now.
Yeah,
That's a really good
I
point.
I can agree with that, with the exception that I think that if there was other players in, it would cover up the cheesing. Like it would kind of cover that base and sort of balance it out. But I
Mhm.
still don't think the mob should be that cheesable, regardless. I
Yeah.
don't think that you should have ways to invulnerable fight the hell mobs. I just don't think that should exist.
Yeah, that part I have to think through more, because as a rogue main, I would like the ability to be useful in a group going to hell. And it's like, again, if they make every mob able to damage you in every scenario, it's like, well, you'll never be able to succeed in hell unless you have a warrior, and then you have a cleric healing him, and then something else. So
No,
I got to think more
agree.
about that.
I don't agree with that either, though. I would challenge what you're saying, because I'm not making the argument that the mobs should be able to hit you all the time. I'm making the argument that you shouldn't be able to invulnerable fight the mobs. I still like that you can, like, when I go and fight a skeleton can hit me and take half my HP, but I can also outplay the skeleton and take no damage. But I am having to outplay it. I'm having to dodge. I'm having to watch his attack patterns. I think that's fine. I think a rogue should be able to go into hell and fight mobs and not take damage if you play well. But I would not lump that in the same category as I crouched and the hitbox can't hit crouching players, so therefore I can, I think there's a difference there.
I agree.
Level of acceptable cheese.
Yeah, I agree. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
But I mean, to end that thought, I think hell needs to be more accessible. I don't know how I feel about this, like, high roller, this gold wall, and like, I think the game needs to be more accessible to stop things like, oh, guess what? I paid 50 gold to go into high roller because no one else wanted to pay it, and now I have the whole map to myself, because like I feel like they need to make it more accessible somehow.
Yeah, they need to incentivize people to drop down to the next level. I feel like I never see it.
I think if they were going to get rid of, like, the high roller type of system, which, Warren, I'm not sure if you're familiar with this. So there's normal and then there's hell, but there's also high roller. Are you familiar with the high roller part of it?
Oh yeah, but you can explain it for other folks.
Okay, so you go into a map, the portal spawn. You can find a portal to escape out, or you can find a portal to go down to hell, which is like just another harder map. Off to the side of that, there is high roller lobbies, which is the exact same thing, your normal map and your hell map, but the high roller lobbies, you pay to go into those lobbies, and as a result, the mobs are harder and the loot is better. I think the mobs are harder. Is that true? Yeah, okay. So high roller is just a mirror of the normal game loop, but more risk, more reward. And I don't think there's nothing. I don't know if I would necessarily. Well, I'd say I think what Zell's proposing is, let's get rid of the high roller lobbies, or the paywall to them. I'm not sure exactly which you're saying. But I would say if they were to do that, then I think they need to implement MMR. And I don't currently think there is any MMR.
MMR would be so hard in this game, because how well you play is like really determined off of your loot. So yeah, that's complicated, but I like the direction you're going. The paywall for me, I think it's just a mental barrier. It's like, it's still doable, but it's just like, paying to go in just feels so bad. And even if it was 1 gold compared to like the 100 gold or whatever it is, it's just like, you just feel so much more invested, and a cheesy death or a lag spike or a disconnect just feels so much worse that it makes me not want to do it.
I agree, but you know what I look at it as, like, that's ranked, right? That's what it is. Like, high roller lobby is ranked lobby.
Yeah, that's what I see. I think like a high roller leaderboard, or even a rank structure. We got in this argument before. We'll always get into it, but I think those things really serve competitive games. As long as you have the ability to separate it, so that folks don't have to put their heart and soul into it, and they can just kind of try to go and have fun too sometimes.
Yeah, I haven't played enough high roller lobbies. I think I've only done it once or twice. So I actually don't know if I'd be willing to put forth like an opinion necessarily yet. I think I like the idea. I don't know for sure yet. I plan to be playing a lot of Dark and Darker, and I do want to jump into, despite popular belief, I do want to jump into some high roller action and gameplay. My characters are just all, like sub level 15 right now, and I don't think it's worth. Well, actually, I don't think you even go into high roller until you're 15.
I'm not sure what the restriction is. I think there's a solo high roller now too.
There is, yeah.
I actually think that's a great change.
Yeah, so I'm curious to experiment with high roller and see what it's like. I almost like the idea of taking it a little slower, taking it a little bit more cautiously, putting more tact into a fight, and it really mattering because they're going in with better gear, and everything that you pick up and loot is going to be better. So I think it sounds fun.
Warren, I want you in with us.
Yeah, I just bought it, so.
Yes. Oh man, hour and a half. That's all it took.
That's all. I mean, that's the thing. Watching the videos, like you would think that would have convinced me away from it more, but if if all of this is really doing is supporting them, like, either proving it one way or the other, yeah, sure. If I have, what was it, $35
Mm-hmm.
of fun, then I got my money's worth, and it's pretty easy to get $35 of fun out of something.
Yeah, I mean that's 2 beers, 2 beers and a muffin.
2 beers at a bar easily.
I think we should revisit this topic like in a couple weeks after Warren has played some. And what I'd love for you to do is try to pay close attention to your micro and macro experience of the game as you play it, on and off, however much you end up playing it.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Well, I think we've probably ran here for a while. How do you guys feel about
It's been a hot
calling
minute.
Yeah, let's go for another hour. Another hour of Dark and Darker.
Ooh. I told y'all this was gonna run long. I told y'all.
I think I'm good.
Yeah, I think we encompassed pretty much every piece of it, and I'm excited to get into more of it after I get some experience in the game.
Yeah. All right. Like and follow our podcast at Out of Potions podcast on YouTube
Oh my god.
and Twitch,
Listen,
and
thank you.
No Potion podcast on X, aka
And find us
platform
on
formerly known as Twitter.
Spotify.
yes.
Spotify. Find us on. I'm working on Apple Podcasts. I think there's a way I can do it without actually having any Apple products. So I'll figure that out. And obviously YouTube, if that's where you're watching it. Yeah.
Yes. Individual plugs, Warren.
Individual plugs. I was trying to
Probably
think of
YouTube
some
for you,
random
right?
thing. I was just trying to think of a random thing. I was
Okay,
like
well,
watching.
while he's thinking of his answer, I'll hop
While
in
he's-
there.
While he's frozen.
I just rebranded from Zell Twitch to Zell XP on everything, so really appreciate anyone checking that out. If you search Zell XP on everything but TikTok, I'll come up. I tried to adjust the capitals in my name in TikTok, and it put me on a 45-day waiting period. So TikTok's not updated, but everything else is good.
That's rough.
Rough. I'm Redworld. You can find me in most places as Redworld333. I'm Redworld333 on Twitch. I think that's what I am on Twitter or X as well. I have just learned from Warren how to do some very basic video editing, so I plan to be uploading like YouTube shorts and maybe like little compilations of notable moments from gameplay. And then Warren, I know you're gonna use your recording, so maybe you got to say your piece, maybe not. I don't know if you wanted to either stab at it again or if it's gonna make it in the video.
Formerly Scott on Twitter.
And Warren Springer Live on YouTube, right? You're doing YouTube now.
Is it Warren Springer Live? I don't fucking know.
It
Yeah.
might just be Warren Springer.
Look at Warren Springer. It's me.
Okay.
Oh, you have two YouTubes that are named that, by the way.
I know. I tried to delete the other one. It's hard. Google's really sticky. They don't want to let you rip them apart.
I pictured everything you just said.
Oh, God. All right, gents. Hey, that was a ton of fun. Thank you guys for doing this again. Can't wait to do the next one. I'm already juiced about the topics, and everyone that's watching. We don't deserve you, but we appreciate you.
I deserve you.
Love. See you guys.
Bye.